Episode 43, Speak with Animals of the Wizard, the Witch, and the Wild One. So as I mentioned, they leave the town they were just in. Brennan says, hey, they're going to be a little bit delayed behind you guys. The Citadel's going to be a little delayed behind you. But despite this, the party's not sure if people will be looking for them. So there's a series of roles that happen. Suvi, I think, did disguise self and had the opportunity to cast that. There's some conversation on how much she can cast that and how many days she can get to keep that going, or maybe it was how many hours. And over the course of time, I think there's a point where like an airship actually passes over them, like a Citadel airship, but the party pretends like they're just travelers on the road or just traders who are just, happening along the way. So a series of checks are made. The party seemingly is able to pass these checks without really much of anything of note. And they do eventually seem to make it to 12 Brooks. Now, arriving in 12 Brooks, Brennan reveals that the forces of Gauthmai are sort of on the edge of the city. He talks about like the river Lythwin that they had followed previously in leaving Absinthe, that it has now sort of like cut across the terrain and passes through 12 Brooks. And I think it's implied that the Gauthmai forces are like south of that or on the other side of the river or just outside of the city. But when they arrive to the city, they see a city that's largely under the control of the Empire. And there are a number of statues and not like temples, but just sort of like iconography and things like that around the city. But the one thing that's of particular interest to Ame is a statue that has been covered in some way. There's like a big tarp that's been put over a statue. And she's very curious about this because most notably, knowing that this region worships the great bullfrog, she hasn't seen anything like that in the city. So she sends the fox and says, hey, I want you to go look under that tarp. Now, Ursulon and Suvi are both kind of like, do we want to do that? Are we sure about that? And Ame's like, I think that would be the next best decision. Now, it's sort of implied that Ame's thinking like, if the great bullfrog is under there, maybe we can summon him or figure out where he is or talk to him or what have you. And in fact, she even says, I'm looking to do what we did in Absinthe, where they went up to the rocks above the city. They talked to the Great Spirit and they brought the water. They brought the flood to help escape. So she says, I'm looking to do something like that again. Fox goes under. Fox goes under the tarp, confirms it is a statue of the great bullfrog, but then she loses sight of the fox. Like she loses communication with the fox. And so she's like, oh, I don't like that. So she sort of rushes in while Suvi has her disguised self on. Ursulon sort of fans out to the side and is sort of like among the people hiding. Ame walks up to the tarp, and I think with the perception check, like with the high 20-something perception check, she sees the wizard Keen of the glass coronet walking up behind her. And around this time, she also notices that there are several soldiers and guards that are all converging on sort of like this town square spot. And as any good D&D player does, it's, hey, what are you doing here? It's crazy to see you. And Keen is not having any of that. Keen is like, essentially in no simple terms, accuses Ame of either absconding from the previous town, having kidnapped Suvi, or that like something nefarious is in play. And Ame is basically like, oh, there must be some kind of misunderstanding, and like kind of tries to talk herself out of it. But it becomes very clear. I can't remember if there was an actual roll or a check here, but Brennan pretty directly says like, hey, this is horrifically bad. Like this is a very bad situation. All that to say, the wizard Keen eventually ends up casting the sleep spell on Ame and is successful. And as a reaction, one of the witch's class abilities is this ability to use a reaction to put a curse on a person attacking you. And so she curses the wizard Keen. But she does go to sleep. She's essentially bound and gagged. The fox is also, I can't remember if it was like petrified or just held, but is also captured. And the two of them are led away. Suvi, seeing all this transpire, who's sort of like hiding in the shadows or is under the disguised self, sends a message to Keen that's like, maybe we should talk a little bit. You want to take it from there?
Yeah. Um, so Suvi sees all this happen and is like, hey, yeah. And Keen is like, yeah, let's talk. So the two of them approach each other, and Keen's like, yeah, we thought you'd been abducted. The prince wishes you to be back in Bracken. And Suvi's like, well, I'm a grown ass adult. I thought I could do what I pleased. And Keen's like, yeah, it's aware that you think you're a princess, but you can't just do as you wish. There's like a chain of command here. And he says, Silver told us everything like he was trained to do. So like we know everything that you've been up to. And Suvi says, okay, well, I was just coming to help my friends. They're here on business. Like, leave them here and I'll come back with you. And Keen says, well, my orders were for Ame and Ursulon to be held captive while you're taken back to Bracken. So that's what I'm going to do. It's at this point that Keen basically puts Suvi on a horse and sends her along with several soldiers to head back to Bracken. Keen does not go with them, though. Ame is then carted off by these guards, and the Keen stuffs, I believe the fox is petrified, and stuffs this petrified fox like into a bag, excuse me. Um, so we then cut to Suvi, who is on horseback with surrounded by guards, headed back to the town. And a while after leaving Reedport, which I think is the name of the town they are in, but I'm not positive. She sees that they're coming across like a body of water. I think it's the River Livewind, but again, don't quote me on that. And there's like this huge stone bridge that they're going to be going across as they cross the river. And she notices that the horses start to like pick up pace, like awkwardly. And Suvi notices all the guards around her getting uncomfortable. Then suddenly, these horses start diving over the bridge, like into the river, and Suvi's horse follows suit. So the next thing she knows, she is submerged in water, and all of these soldiers are being attacked by these like massive sea creatures. There's like a huge crocodile, like there's tentacles and claws like coming left, right, and center. And one such like tentacle grabs Suvi, like constricts her up and starts dragging her through the water into the depths further. We then cut to Ursulon, who saw everything happen with both Ame and Suvi, but he was on his own. And Suvi had actually uncorked Vandal, her little ink guy, and Vandal kind of filled Ursulon in on exactly what happened with Keen. So Ursulon decides to tail Keen, and he sees that Keen walks into a butcher shop with Ame's unconscious body. And I think it was an insight check or something like that, but Lou rolls really high and basically realizes that the shrine covered by the tarp had been a trap for Ame. This was a trap for him. Keen wants Ursulon to believe he's about to go like torture Ame in this butcher shop, and it's a way to draw him out. So instead of acting impulsively and like charging in there, he instead decides that, you know what, time might be on my side in this scenario. We then cut back to Suvi, who is starting to drown as she's being drugged through the water until she is finally thrust back up onto the surface in what appears to be like a smuggler's cave. We heard there was a lot of stuff like this when Ame made the map or got the map from Grandmother Rin's house. So I'm assuming it's just one of many of those. Um, and then this 25-foot crocodile basically comes out of the water after her and turns into a man. And Suvi realizes that all of the horses they had been riding were in actuality shapeshifters. And this had all been like a trap from, enemy forces. A then huge, massive, primate esque creature comes out of the water, and Brennan reveals that this is Yorin. And he approaches Suvi and says, why can't I hurt you? Suvi, recognizing Yorin, just immediately says his name, and he goes, how do you know my name? And she says, she then like channels her mom and says, I thought she told you to never frighten her daughter. And Yoren like is just completely flabbergasted by this. He can't believe it. And she says, I'm the wizard Sky, daughter of Soft and Stone. And Yorn's still just, utterly processing all of this, but he says, you took a lot of my guys' lives back in Avison. And then he transforms back into his manly figure. Suvi says, well, I guess that makes us even because you killed my parents. And Yorn's like, what are you talking about? And Suvi explains, the last time I saw you when I was a kid, I was sent away to Grandmother Wren's. And then Steele came and picked me up and said that my parents had died at your hands. And Yorn said, well, if I had done that, then we could settle it here and now and you would have every right. I betrayed your parents, but I didn't kill them. I don't know what happened to them. And Suvi's like, why did you betray them? And he says, they lost their minds. Steele told you that I killed them? And Yoren's like, what? Why were you being escorted just now? And Suvi kind of fills him in that, she had been kind of half arrested for having fled. And Yoren laughs and says, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. He then says, I never knew how your parents died. We had gone to Silbury, with you when you were a kid, sent you off to Rin's to be safe because she had bowed out of the conflict by then. And I knew that your parents had been sent to spy on me, but I knew that they were also more so spying on Gauthmai. So it was kind of a like we were using each other situation. But as we worked together, as I, you know, learned more about them, I realized that, they were all right people. And as the work continued, they told me about this League of Whispers within the Citadel that they were investigating and how a group called, and so then the group called the Acatador, I always butcher that pronunciation, Acatador? Anyway, that group was formed, working outside the chain of command of the Citadel, and it included outsiders like me and Rin. And this was illegal in the Citadel's eyes. But even still, they were ultimately hoping to help the Citadel and free it from the corruption that the League of Shadows represented. So we'd been working for years, and then one day, literally the day before the Ruve attack, we had a breakthrough. And we caught what we believed to be the leader of the League of Whispers. And that's when we learned that they were actually working in conjunction with the Citadel the whole time. This was not rot. This was not corruption. This was just another sector of Citadel operations. And Subi does a big old insight check on everything that Yoren is telling her, and she hits a nat 20. And Yoren fully believes with his full chest everything that he is saying. So he is not lying here. So Suvi just vomits at processing this information, and Yorn immediately like rushes to her to try to help her, gets her some water, and even casts a spell to like make it be more pleasant, like a nice smell, nice taste. Um, Yorn then continues and says, at that point the jig was up. We felt as everything we had worked on was meaningless, um, because the Citadel knew the whole time and they were cool with it. But there were still some loose threads, and one of them was tracking down this sorceress, Nahani. We were worried about potential mind control and enchantments that they were capable of or they were working on or something. But then that's when Roof attacked. So we had to get you out, and that's why we went to Silbury. We then had to split up, and they said they would meet me at the tomb of the Sun King to try and deal with this Nahani person. But that's when I knew that they were crazy because the jig was up. What was the point anymore? But your parents were still determined that the corruption was actually there. But you don't live as long as I do making bad bets, and we'd lost. I knew it was time to walk away. So I went back underground and connected with old allies. I had decided I'd focused enough on the Citadel, and it was time to focus on my homeland. Maybe I was foolish to walk away, but I abandoned them. And Suvi, after hearing all of this, apologizes to him for spending her whole life hating him. And Yoren says that's what this is. That's what this giant churning machine is. It makes monsters out of men. And I've had to become a monster too to try and stop it. He then reaches out and says, well, you're not dead here at the bottom of the river. So what were you trying to do? And Suvi then explains basically the rough story of everything that was going on with her and Ursulon and Ame and the bullfrog and the kids. And Yoren's eyes go wide as he hears this, and he goes, "That's where the Grenot children are." And he goes, "You want some help?" And Suvi says, "Yes." And that's where the episode ends. Again, episode 43, Speak with Animals. And apologies if that ran a little long. There was a lot revealed in that second half, so I wanted to do it justice.